I would like to invite Avital Kaye Tzadok, PhD, who is the head of the master's program in social work and the director of the Center of Resilience, Community and Leadership at Rupin Academic Center. Israel, she's a social worker, a lecturer, a group therapist, and a certified supervisor. She has 2 decades of experience working with traumatized populations with a focus on adolescents and young women at risk. Her research and publications explore trauma, resilience, post-traumatic growth, and trauma-informed practice. And she teaches widely on these themes in social work education, and she's a very cherished colleague. So without any further ado, Avital, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm going to talk about beyond the classroom academic responsibility in times of mass trauma. I'm going to incorporate some games, some in-class activities. I'm sure you guys do it too in your classes, and I like to do it in mine. So the first game is a very narcissistic game. It's called the numbers game, and it's all about me. Okay, so instead of introducing myself over and over in the regular way, I'm just introducing myself through numbers. So I'm going to give you a number, and you are going to guess how it's related to me. Okay, can you close the door, please, over there? Thank you. 1979. Good. 2012. Nope.
Graduated.
Good. I finished my PhD at Tel Aviv University in social work. Next number is 3. Wow, they're a strong crowd. Done. Okay, and this one's a little harder, The number is 4.
4 husbands.
Just one is enough. No, not siblings.
4 cats or dogs?
I actually have 3 of the cats.
Number of the house where you live.
No. Okay, so I lived for 4 non-consecutive years in the U.S.
Wow.
And that's probably where my accent is from, even though I'm actually half British. So you wouldn't know by my accent, but my dad is actually from London. My father. Okay, next number is 11. Yeah, that's true, but that's not what I was going for. That's also true. Okay, so working directly with at-risk adolescents as a social worker, I did that for 11 years before coming to Rupin and spending most of my time in academia. And during those 11 years, that number is related to that period of time, over 700. Yeah, over those 11 years, I worked with over 700 adolescents who came from all over the country, experienced risk, trauma, adversity before coming to us. And we were actually a program located in Tel Aviv University where we taught them to become mentors to help other younger at-risk adolescents. So, and I was fortunate to meet over 700 of them over the years. This is a little of a sad number related to those adolescents, over 50%. No. A lot of them, that's true for a lot of them, but over 50% of them, when I did my PhD research and they filled out questionnaires and I asked about child and sexual abuse, I realized that over 50% of them went through childhood sexual abuse. So trauma was, highly prevalent in the context that I worked in. Next number, 2010. Okay, first year I taught a course in the academy, in higher education, and I've been doing that ever since. Okay, so one more game, and this time less narcissistic, less about me, more about you, the neighbor game. I want you to turn to your neighbor, just 30 seconds or so. What's your name? Where did you come from today? Just say hi to your neighbor. Let's go. This time you have to turn to a different neighbor. If you turn to your left, now turn to your right. If you look forward, now turn back. 30 seconds, get to know another neighbor. Go ahead.
Levy? Don't ask, don't ask. Guys from a very far away place. How was it? How was the trip here?
And I'm moving forward. Neighbors, go back to your seats. We're continuing. Okay, good dedication to the game. Okay, so okay, what I'm going to talk about today. Three main topics, a little bit, I'm not going to go too much into it, but just a little bit about trauma and trauma's aftermath, a little bit about how trauma affects learning processes and academic success, and I'm going to try to focus mostly on the third topic, which is what is our role in it as educators, and talk a little bit also about challenges, okay? I like to have things a little bit complex. Not too easy. Okay, so a little story about this lecture is actually before even October 7th. A dear colleague of mine, her name is Shira, she had a student in class who seemed very distraught and asked to go outside, didn't come back to the class, and she talked to him later about what's going on, and she realized he was post-traumatic and he had a very difficult time learning. And that moment she realized that, you know, she's just like me, she's a social worker and we work a lot in the field of trauma, and she realized that we know a lot about trauma, we teach about trauma to our students, but we don't actually stop to think about the fact that some of them have gone through traumas, some of them may have PTSD, and what do we know about that? So we started, you know, what do we do as researchers, right? We find something that's interesting to us, that we're curious about, and we started a research project. So we started a research project about trauma in higher education. Actually, this was before October 7th. We haven't published any of it yet, but I'm going to be happy to, through Tal, to give you some of the published work later. But this is how we started getting interested in trauma in higher education. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of difficult material today, but I still want to, you know, give this warning ahead of time that, you know, for some people, some of this topic may be difficult and may evoke different reactions. So please be attentive to your own needs. If you need just to take a short break, I can understand that. And at the end of the session, if you do feel a need to talk, I urge you to talk to a trusted person, or I will also give my details at the end of the presentation today. So just a teeny bit of what are we talking about? What is trauma? So two definitions. One from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, just so you'll know what these initials stand for. Initial trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And one other definition, which is from the American Psychological Association, which is what is adopted in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, elaborates a little bit further. So now we're going to play another game, and I want you to think prior to October 7th, okay? Prior to October 7th, we'll talking a little bit about trauma in the higher education setting, okay? Trauma in higher education setting. So the game is called, this is the answer, what is the question? So I'm giving you a statistics, somewhere between 66% and 94%, that's the answer. You guys need to guess what's the question. What's the answer to which question?
What's the question?
Okay, what percentage of people or students have experienced a traumatic event in their life?
Good, very good. We can give a round of applause to Amy.
But it's the number of someone, like I know someone who has experience.
Okay, thank you. Round of applause to Leah. Okay, so actually, Amy, you were spot on. We're from research around the world, between 66% and 94% of students in higher education report exposure to one or more traumatic events during their lives. Okay, think about this.
Are these students in America?
Yeah, this is from the world, not from Israel. So you guys can do the math yourself. Okay, this is from the world. And another another data, which is also a little bit rough. 50%. That's the answer. What's the question? Who wants to try?
You mentioned before those who have been sexually abused.
Oh, that was from a specific group that I worked with. No, this is about something else. Also, trauma in the higher education. That's the context. Any ideas?
Never spoken to anyone about it.
That's a good guess. Good guess.
receiving therapy for it.
Okay, I'll help you guys out. 50%. This is going to be also a little bit sad, I think. 50% of students report that they were exposed to a traumatic event during the first year of studies. So they're coming in with a lot of them with a history of trauma. And some of them, even those that did not come in with a history of trauma, might be encountering trauma actually on campus or off campus, but during the first year of their study. Okay, so this is the numbers, the prevalence, I think is something that we cannot ignore, right? They talk to us so much about, students, and of course that's not less important, but, who are blind, who are deaf, who are handicapped in some way. We need to, we need to be accessible for everyone. But think about the prevalence of trauma, and have you really thought about accessibility for that population? Now, all of this was before October 7th. October 7th adds just another very complex layer that we call mass trauma. Mass trauma is one of those large-scale events. We're talking about a large number of affected individuals, prolonged, pervasive exposure to traumatic conditions that we've all lived through, right, these past 2 years. It often involves a novel or unexpected disruption that generates widespread panic, regardless of direct destructive impact, okay? Which is, note the difference, right? It doesn't have to happen next to me or that I have to see it, but still, I can really respond to that. A defining feature is the significant this is a very important sentence, you guys, the significant imbalance created between external demands and available resources, and between the magnitude of harm and capacity for individual and collective recovery. Why am I stressing this last part of it? Because a lot of times when we talk about collective trauma and people are just kind of afraid, right, to touch this topic, and they tell me, Avital, we can't deal with it. Leave it to you guys. You guys are the therapists. You guys should deal with this. And what I want to tell you today, we're not enough. Just statistically speaking, we don't have enough. We need more people on board with us. That's what we're going to talk about today. What is your role? I'm not suggesting you guys provide therapy, right? That's not a responsible thing. But what can you do that is responsible, that is relevant, knowing that almost 100% of your student population has been going through mass trauma in this past 2 years. And just to add one more layer of complexity, because here in Israel we can't have things simple, I want to add just one more term, which is the shared traumatic reality, which is also very relevant. And what that means is this is a little bit about you guys, because this concept of shared traumatic reality, which the world started researching, there were two main sites where this was researched around the world. One was New York, the September 9/11. Yeah, that was what I was searching for. 9/11, and in Sderot. Okay, these were two sites where over the years researchers have researched this idea of shared traumatic reality, where we, whether it's therapists, professionals, lecturers, working in different organizations or in higher education as faculty, we're exposed alongside our students to a state of disaster or trauma that affects the community in which we live and work. So this collective event has the potential to be experienced as traumatic for the entire community. And this event is occurring in the present. So you guys are experiencing double exposure. Once, through your own selves and eyes, okay? And two, as faculty and staff who will be in interaction with people who have been affected. So if a student comes to you at the end of class and starts telling you about what they've been through as a reserve soldier, right? That's one more, that's one more layer of exposure that is you guys are encountering. Okay, and just one more piece of context, I think, is the unique aspects of the Israeli context after October 7. So I don't know if you guys remember, but it wasn't really easy here or non-complex before. I don't know if you guys remember those times. So first of all, we have the intensity and nature of the event. This was, by the way, per capita, October 7th was the deadliest terrorist attack in the world in the last 50 years, okay, per capita. So the extensive scope and the casualties and the extremely shocking circumstances are very difficult to handle. The helplessness, the atmosphere of ongoing threat till this day, the deep sense of lack of protection. Where was Tzava Achi Chazak Ba'olam? Where was the IDF that we believe to be the strongest army in the world? The ambiguous loss, which means sometimes that you lose things that it's not even clear whether is that person alive or dead. That's an ambiguous loss. We don't know how to handle that sort of thing. It's very difficult. The thousands of Israelis displaced, and the turbulent socio-political context for a lot of people, the lack of trust in decision makers and politicians, the unexpected changes in life habits and routines, the increased uncertainty, and the reduction and even elimination of transitional spaces between professional and personal experience. How many times have you gone to the mamad mikrat, to the protected shelter with your students, right? You're there. It's not, I'm now a professional, now I'm personal. No, we're going through this together. So I just want to ask one more question. Is it true to say that after October 7th, speaking about ourselves and our students, is it true to say that we are all in the same boat? No, Amy, what do you want to say?
Well, our talk is going to be teaching Jewish and Arab students, which have very different narratives about the events of October 7th.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So even about the 20% of Arab population living in Israel, so that for them it's a different experience. So the answer obviously is yes and no. That was just one example, obviously, but there's so many more examples. We are all in the same turbulent waters, but we are in very different boats. We are in very different boats. We talked to students right after October 7th. We called each and every one of the 187 students that study our undergraduate social work degree to ask them if they're okay. And so many of them said, I went back to my parents' house, I was living in an apartment that didn't have a shelter, or I was just scared to be on my own, so I went back to, one student, one of the other times that there was, one of the rounds with Iran, we had to teach online. That was the end of this academic year, right? You guys remember? We went online, and I met my students for a class, and I saw this one of my students. She was just, I saw she was like distraught, but like in a funny way. So I asked her, hey, what's going on? She said, listen, I'm back home with my parents, and I can't stand it anymore. I mean, she's telling me that I need to walk my dog. It's my dog. I've taken care of it for 7 years. I've been living on my own. She needs to remind me when I need to walk my dog. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, funny and humorous, but there really were a lot of difficult situations. And if we're thinking about trauma, other than the definitions of my esteemed colleagues from APA and all those places, we need to realize psychologically, what does this experience entail? Psychologically, the core of trauma is the disruption, or even Jennifer Woolman would call it the shattering of the perceived safety, control, and self-esteem. So this line is very important for me. I want you guys to kind of remember that, even take a picture if you want, because, you know, when we're talking about, you need to realize what the problem is when you're trying to fix it, right? You need to figure what is wrong, or like, for example, someone gets bitten from a snake, we need to know which snake was it in order to give the right antidote. So same thing here, we need to figure out what happened and what is the antidote. So what happened is shattering of safety, control, and self-efficacy. I want you to keep that in mind. We're going to talk about today some models of what is the antidote for this. So just I'm not going to go into the whole neurobiological aspects of trauma, but just to mention that, in fact, there are neurobiological processes that we go through after trauma. This is happening in the brain. It's not just happening you know, in the body and in the soul. It's happening in the brain. Okay, and we leave what we call the window of arousal. Well, the regulated brain is in its optimum arousal, is able to stay and play and learn. Here, the brain is leaving, okay, because of trauma, is leaving this area when we're in life-threatening danger. That's actually, you know, evolution-wise, that's very smart, right? Our brains are wired to take all of the energy into the systems that we now need to fight, flight, or freeze, okay, to get it to escape. No one is going to sit down and learn a chapter or two when they're fighting for their lives, okay? So the energy is taken from those parts, and we actually, all these different studies have shown, when looking into students, for example, who have PTSD versus students who do not have PTSD, they have shown that PTSD impairs thinking processes, memory, speech, judgment, information processing, fear and anxiety regulation, what is perceived as threatening, and establishing relationship with peers and authority figures. So here we have something that affects so many parts of learning. They're coming into our classroom, we want them to learn, and this is what's going on with them. They're not regulated, they're thinking where to run, they're looking where the door is, or how they can escape if someone comes in. Okay, and we're going on with our syllabus, right, and our content and whatever we want to deliver because we have to. But I want to bring some optimism into the room. We know from research around the world, in Israel also, that most people will not develop post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, following mass trauma. Most people will be resilient. In fact, looking at numbers from around the world, we are talking about approximately 9% of students who will suffer from PTSD, and those rates go a little higher if you look into minority populations or female students, where that can rise to about 15%. Not to say that's not a lot, that's also a lot. That's, you know, that's 10 to 15 people in a class of 100, that's also a lot. But just to think about the prevalence of resilience, which is important. But what does it look like for someone with PTSD, for those 10 to 15 students in our classroom, which has 100 people in it? So let's see a short clip, a little how that feels and looks like.
איבי, חיי היום שלך.
סבבה, היה לי יום סבבה.
As you can see, this video was made by Natal, a very important video, and when we're talking about symptoms of PTSD, and by the way, someone can have PTSD, and someone might not have PTSD, but can have symptoms at a non-clinical level that will experience symptoms of intrusion, where unwanted and distressing memories suddenly come to mind, arousal, heightened alertness and reactivity, avoidance, trying to avoid reminders of the trauma, negative mood, dissociation, feeling detached from reality or oneself. We really saw that, I think, in the video. Difficulty concentrating and learning, academic impairment, which is really relevant for all of us. Challenges in maintaining job performance. When you can't sleep at night because of nightmares, how well will you be able at 8 o'clock to go to either, to learn or to study, and more. These are some of how it looks like, some of the behaviors. And we do see from studies around the world that students with PTSD compared to students without may have lower academic achievements, demonstrate higher rates of attrition, and experience a lower sense of campus belonging, that it means they feel less connected, they perceive less available support and sense that fewer people care about them. But what I've been researching most of my adult life is actually not just trauma. I've been researching resilience, because I think that that's the most interesting thing, is that how come some people develop PTSD while so many others do not, right? I actually got that idea from the adolescent girls that I was working with, as some of them have been through hell and back. And they were amazing, bright young women. So I was thinking, how is this possible? How can you go through such horrific trauma? And I think today you guys may be thinking the same thing when you see like people like Elisha Abi, right? And people who have come back from and you see how resilient you are, and you can't even comprehend. How is that even possible? So resilience, and this is a common misconception around resilience, is some people, when I tell people I research resilience, a lot of people say, well, some people are just born like that, right? People think, they're just superheroes. Okay, they woke up with different genes, or I don't know, they had like this suit on that protects them from trauma. That's not true. That, in fact, in terms of academic research, I can tell you that's not true. We're not talking about superheroes, superwomen, supermen. Michael Unger, who's a Canadian researcher, a highly esteemed Canadian researcher who studies resilience, has suggested the following definition. In the context of exposure to significant adversity, resilience is both the capacity of individuals to navigate their way to the psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources that sustain their well-being, and their capacity, individually and collectively, to negotiate for these resources to be provided and experienced in culturally meaningful ways. In other words, resilience is explained mostly by the question of protective factors and processes. Now, I'm simplifying something that we teach throughout the year, just a very, very short message, but I think it's enough for today. Resilience happens here. Resilience happens when people have, it's both individual characteristics, not both, but individual characteristics, familial characteristics, wider social environment characteristics, and the shared space, where the overlapping space, when you have all three of them, that's where you have resilience. So if it was just, you were born with it, you know, it would be just this blue circle here. So yes, of course, we have some individual characteristics that are related to, it's part of the answer, but that's not all of it. You had a question in the back?
So basically what you're talking about is the toolkit, as in the basis of psychology, when you're saying that there is a defense mechanism that each and every individual has created based on the anchoring experiences that has been imprinted in their lives. Familial characteristics, everything that you're talking about. So would it be correct to say that you're talking about the defense mechanism and the substance and the scope of the defense mechanism that each and every individual has actually created
It's
in order
more
to be able to?
Defense mechanisms is part of it, but it's more than that, because defense mechanism in psychology, it's a very, very specific angle. This is more...
I'm saying defense mechanism because in my perception, that's also what distinguishes between a person who suffered the same experiences, but one has the PTSD and the other doesn't. Mm-hmm. And that's where the defense mechanism, the availability and the substance of the defense mechanism and characteristics,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely
between that person.
It's definitely part of the answer. It's definitely part of the answer. So when we're talking about, so let me ask you a question. So I'll give an example and then I want to ask you guys a question. So individual characteristics, we can talk about intelligence and self-esteem and self-efficacy and different variables that will be related to resilience. And familiar characteristics, we can talk about, you know, having, by the way, even in very troubled families, which is the type of families that I usually work with as a social worker, you would have familial characteristics that are protective. You know, that adolescent might have that grandma who always looked after her. Her parents abused her, but her grandma was a positive figure. Or they may have that aunt that was always there for them, okay? And by the way, in their younger siblings, having younger siblings to look after, who admire you, look up to, that's also a protective familial factor. And in the wider social environment characteristics, we have just everything that can happen outside of the family. So it can be, so a trusted teacher is so common in resilience research as someone that has helped them throughout the years. Okay, or a youth movement, or extracurricular activities. It just, the list goes on and on. So I want to ask you a trick question now. I just convinced you, hopefully, that resilience requires having all three protective factors, right? The individual, the familiar, and the wider social environment. But if I were to give you a magic wand, and you could spread that magic wand over one circle and kind of enlarge it for your students, you could strengthen them by giving them either a boost for their individual characteristics or their familial ones or the wider social environment. Where would you spread your magic? One or two, let's have one or two answers. Your name?
Family.
Family. Why?
I think family is, you know, early childhood, your experience as a child really matter as you grow older. I think it's the foundation of who you are, so family.
Okay. Hands, give a clap of hands for Ruti. Ruti is convincing us of family. Anyone want to spread their magic over a different circle? And
I would put it on the individual.
Yes. Why?
Because those are resources that you cultivate that enable you to do Most everything in life.
Okay, hands of applause to Anne. So we have one final circle who has not been voted yet. Do you want to add your vote to the no?
With the same.
You're with Anne.
But for different reasons.
For different reasons. Go ahead.
Well, self-care.
Your name?
Galit.
Yeah.
Self-care and self-love is where everything starts. So if you believe in yourself, then you can cultivate everything else.
Okay. Thank you. Hand of applause to Galit. Yeah. Someone else? Okay. Leah.
Yes. I'm sorry, but I disagree. I think the environment is the most important factor.
Why?
Because there's more chances of intervention and more opportunity to change it. Even for the person, they can change the environment. They can.
Okay. Applause to Leah. I'm sorry, I see there are more hands raised, but I don't have enough time, so I'm going to move forward. And I want to tell you that actually, from all of you, Leah, you were right. Yes, yes. And I wanna read from the words of Michael Ungar, who's a wonderful practitioner and researcher. Over in Nova Scotia, it's very cold up there. Studies support a view that resilience is both the innate capacity of young people and the quality of their family systems to find ways of coping following exposure to acute and chronic stressors, as well as the capacity of their schools, communities, service providers, and government legislators to provide resources in ways that are meaningful to those who are impacted by, specifically he's talking about maltreatment here, but it's also true about trauma, and I didn't bring his other quote that actually talks about the variance, the statistical variance shows us that the most important circle is actually what lasted. And that is very important because look how the first answers, how we're so skewed towards that perception about how the family is so important, how individual capacity is so, it's not that they're not, but there's so much hope because you know what's there in the environment? All of us, we're in that circle. And what does this all mean for us? So I want to mention 4 models that are, I talked about our roles as educators in this, in promoting resilience. And I'm going to bring some models, and also I'm going to then challenge us in some findings from one of my studies after October 7, saying that it's very simple when you put it on a nice screen, but it's more complicated in real life, okay? So the first model is the trauma-informed approach, which is guided by 4 assumptions, basic assumptions known as the 4 R's. This is a very widely known model across the world, okay? And they're saying that for us to be trauma-informed, we first of all need to realize about trauma and how it can affect people in groups. Did we do that today, yes or no? Yes, good time, we've been listening. 2, recognize the signs of trauma. Did we do that today? Yeah. Good, you guys are all moving forward to being more trauma-informed. Then we need to have a system which can respond to trauma. Do you guys have student services? Do you have dekanat? Do you have people that help students if they have some kind of psychological need? Yes, good, that's number 3. And then you need to resist re-traumatization. Which is a huge thing. I'm not going to talk about all of that today, but even the slide that I had at the beginning, remember when I told you how some of the material might be triggering, and that's an example of number 4. Okay, how we can resist re-traumatization. If you're going to show a video in class that you know for some students might be a trigger, then you can either approach them individually before class or just say something collectively just before showing the video, and that's an example of that. Okay, the next model I want to talk about is the continuity principle. It's actually a principle, the continuity principle by Omer and Meron. This is very interesting. This is something that was developed here in Israel. You see that already over 20 years ago, Milchemet HaMifratz. And it has actually affected how the world, not just in Israel, but how we see collective trauma and how we react to it as professionals. And what they offer is very interesting because they say that in coping with disaster in its various stages, the managerial and therapeutic efforts should be directed toward preserving the different continuities in the lives of the individual, family, organization, and community, or restoring them. Functional continuity, identity continuity, and interpersonal continuity. Let's see what that means, each one of these. So the functional continuity is maintained when the individual, family, or organization continues and fulfills their roles despite the disaster. So just to give an example, if I'm a social worker working at a hotel with internally displaced people, and I see that a child is crying very hard. So one thing I could do is I could like hold them or tend to them, help them, but if I have this in mind, what is something better that I might do?
The mother.
Help their parent do that. That's the continuity principle. If their parent is responsible for their well-being in times of peace, they should be held responsible for their well-being now also. Of course, I need to give them, tools and knowledge how to do that. But it's much better for that child to receive that help from their parent than from me. And it's also much better for the parent. Because remember what the disease is? Remember? Anyone remembers that slide? What did we have with the shattered glass? Remember? The shattering, safety, self-esteem, self-efficacy. So we feel helpless. The antidote is not feeling helpless. Okay?
Similar to the continuum concept of childbirth, if you're familiar with that.
I'm not aware of it, but okay, I believe you. Identity continuity is maintained with the ongoing identity consciousness of the self, family, and organization is preserved despite the disruptions or disasters. So if I was the head of the BSW department at our college on October 7th. At the evening of October 7th, I sent an email to all the community saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is what you need to do. So I'm keeping, my identity continues. Okay, there's been this huge mass disaster. I'm not a mefaked in the tzava, right? I'm not an army, but I still have a role here. Okay, and continue that identity. And the next is the interpersonal continuity. That is maintained when relationships that were meaningful in the past continue to be so in the present and the future despite the disaster. Okay, and then I want to go to the third model. I know I'm just mentioning them very briefly. I'm not going into them very deeply. You guys can read more about it if you'd like. And this is actually from a very important article called 5 Essential Elements of Immediate and Midterm Mass Trauma Interventions, Empirical Evidence. It's a very important article. I can tell you after October 7th, I gave about 20, 30 lectures just about this of 90 minutes, just about this model, because it's critical for service providers to be aware of it. And what we actually need to do after mass trauma, and I'm talking about the few hours after it and the months following, has it become very hot in here, or is it just me? No. It's cold? Okay. Okay, that happens to me in class too. So promoting a sense of safety, promoting calming, promoting a sense of self and collective efficacy, promoting connectedness, promoting hope. So if after a mass disaster I ask students, according to a list, to call each other and see how they're doing, I might be promoting this and this one. If I'm doing a breathing exercise when I go online, Zoom, and I'm teaching them, and I start with the breathing exercises, and promoting 1 and 2. We need to expand our toolbox to learn how to do this. My students know, by the way, this was true also before October 7th, but it's still true today. My students know when they come into my class, there's always music playing in the background. Just, those 6 minutes before, just get that energy of calming, okay? It costs nothing, you guys. It's just YouTube. You just hit play. It's not, it doesn't require a lot of effort or a lot of knowledge, okay? So that's just for one example. And then finally, we have these 6 key principles of a trauma-informed approach, talking about safety, trustworthiness, support and connection, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. I'll be happy to send the presentation to you guys because I gave a lot of examples that I won't have the time to talk about actually in class, how we do that in class. And I also gave examples from research from abroad about, I'll give this example. This is a study from abroad about trauma-informed in higher education. And this is a student that was actually sexually assaulted, and she needed an extension on 2 of her papers. And she turned to the professors and asked them, and this is what she tells in the study, this is what she tells the interviewer. When this event happened, I asked for an extension from 2 of my professors. One of them said, absolutely no problem. The other professor, these are social work professors, okay, just to be absolutely forthright. And the other professor I had addressed how I was, if I was receiving services, reported the incident and asked that I receive follow-up from school services. The last thing she addressed was that I could have an extension for longer than I asked for, and she told me to call her if I needed further assistance. That meant a lot to me, more than I could have guessed it would. Okay, maybe, okay, this was a Beyonce video. I wanted you guys to dance a little bit. And just to give it an example of collaboration, mutuality, I sent a Google form to my students and I asked them to pick an uplifting song. And then at the middle of class, I just hit play on one of the songs they chose, and they are allowed for 3 minutes to get up, walk, dance, whatever they want, can sit, and then we continue class. Okay, but they choose the songs. And when you're teaching quantitative social research methods at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's the only way to maybe keep them alert. So a lot of this is also related to good pedagogy, right? It's not just, but it's also trauma-informed. I want to briefly mention some challenges. One is a challenge of being an authority after October 7th. And this is from a study that is just this is from an article that's just been accepted for publication, so it will be out soon. It's in press to now. And in this study, we interviewed group leaders about their experiences in the acute phase after October 7th. So we interviewed these guys about their experience about a month after October 7th. Okay, so really close to the event. And Naomi, who's an organizational consultant, shared her experience that she facilitated an online resilience workshop for educators a few weeks after the massacre, not you guys, other people. A participant stops me and really aggressively says, "Excuse me, but everything you said sounds like slogans. How is it even possible to talk about coping now, about flexibility, about continuity? It's nothing but slogans." She attacks me and starts to paint the picture black. And all this in front of me, in front of the authority figure. It was not easy for me at all. And then in making sense of the situation, we say, no, we realize that discussing coping without giving enough space for pain may have brought on the aggression. A part of me wanted to tell her, you're right, the situation is terrible. Like there was a part of me that agreed with her. Moreover, Naomi connected the occurrence to the wider social context. I think that being a group leader now is a very difficult task, because even being an authority now, because there is a crisis in trusting the country's leadership. The leadership did not protect. The leader was not a responsible adult. The leadership disappointed. And I felt like she directed all of her anger towards me, which was really because of the leadership. So it calmed me down a little bit. I think a lot of us are experiencing hostility, misplaced anger, because of the fact we're stepping into that authority position. And they don't have Bibi to shout at, or other politicians nearby, but they do have us. And for my 15 years in academy, I can say that the most aggressive emails and sayings that I received happened right after October 7th. It's hard being an authority right now, let me tell you. And the second challenge I want to talk is this challenge of flexibility. Robin, a social worker who facilitates a group for women coping with chronic pain, said, "Is it possible in a situation of war to maintain the group setting? It is as if we were supposed to demonstrate infinite flexibility." You guys probably relate to this. There were things that we did that were unusual in terms of absences, and we allowed it. But let's say a participant is late and wants to join the Zoom in the middle of a session, and there's a war, and it's like, no. And we said it's okay not to join, but we also have responsibility for the group. So it felt like it was also about how much do you see me, how much do you see the group, which are all questions that may come up in any situation, in any group. Things that used to be very clear, suddenly were not. right? When we let someone enter, when we do not. How many absences are they allowed? Everything became such a dilemma, and we also carried so much guilt. Everything was challenged. But I want to mention one last quote that really, I think is really meragesh. Gabriel, a social psychologist working with adults coping with social anxiety, stated, "These events, it's like experiencing an earthquake. And I saw the role of the group is to remind everyone of themselves that we had dreams before, and we have more dreams to fulfill during and after. And in that context, I think that the very fact that people know that they have this time on the week, on Sunday at 6 o'clock, the group, it seems to me that in days of so much uncertainty, some kind of anchor, which is more significant than regular times, they are relieved that Sunday has arrived. It's a very, very big thing. We have an anchoring role. We have an anchoring setting. When we keep meeting them and telling them, we're going to learn, we're going to continue to the agenda, that sometimes may feel to some of them as if we're strict, as if we're not flexible enough. But actually, you guys need to think about all of the things that we talked about today, why it's important. It's about continuity. It's about telling them we will not step down from, we won't be, terror is not going to win. We're going to continue our studies. We're going to continue living here. We're going to continue all of the things that we did before. And for some people, that's really a relief. And for some, it's a challenge. And we are there in the middle of it. But it's very important to keep on going, to keep and demanding that they keep doing all the things that they did before. I gave you the reasons today why. So if I could summarize my message to you today, is I want you guys as educators to stay strong, but also stay soft. Model resilience, which includes showing your vulnerability too. Students have seen me cry, they've seen me, vulnerable. That's okay, that's the circumstances. I don't need to hide that. Be sure to connect between them because trauma isolates. Just like we did today in the morning when I asked you to find a neighbor and then another neighbor. These connections are very important. You will be here after I leave, and they will be there for each other after the course is over. You are their teacher, but first and foremost, you are a fellow human being. And it's okay to say things like, that not as a teacher, but just as a fellow human being. Acknowledge pain. You can see if there's pain in the room, you can acknowledge it, but always acknowledge hope. This country was built by people who've gone through the worst. I know I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, so I know we can overcome, and we will overcome. Some more on trauma-informed teaching and learning. We won't play the neighbor game again, but I wanted you guys to share a takeaway message with your neighbor. You guys will do it on your break. One last poem we will read. תראי, it's in Hebrew, נעמה מוזס. בהתחלה של הסוף היא ראתה רק חושך. בחלוף הזמן הבחינה בכמה כוכבים. הם שימשו לה מצפן, הם סימנו עבורה דרך. העניקו מזור למכאובים. בקרוב הבטחתי. יהיה ליל ירח מלא, ותראי אהובה, איך שוב הכל יתמלא. Thank you.